When I become president, I will work immediately to repeal and replace Obamacare with a system that looks more like the successful enterprises and successful systems of our great country.
All right, Jeb Bush talking about his plan to do away with and replace Obamacare today. Let's bring in our panel to talk about that and much more. Syndicated columnist George Will, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor of The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. All right, George, I'll start with you. Prior to the race really kicking into high gear, a lot of people said Jeb Bush is going to be serious on policy. That's what he will sway voters with. It's been a very different race than he expected.
It has been, but he's proceeding as the policy wonk in the race. And what he unveiled today, although it bears a strong resemblance to what John McCain proposed in 2008, it's nevertheless pure, strong conservatism built around low-cost, high-deductible insurance that makes you eligible for health savings accounts. You pay for your everyday health expenses out of your own pocket, gives you some skin in the game, and you get a tax credit for that preferred savings. Now, Americans seem to think that deductibles are a kind of violation of natural rights, and that health insurance ought to pay for everything, but they don't think that auto insurance ought to pay for your oil changes or your windshield wipers. Still, it's a good start, and he would also cap the ability of employers to provide untaxed health insurance, which means he and Hillary Clinton, she's attacking the so-called Cadillac tax, are on the same page here.
Yeah, about that concept. All right, let's look at the overall poll. Brand new polls from Fox News. This is among Republican primary voters looking at the entire field. You still got Trump at the top at 24%, but in a virtual tie with Carson at 23%. Working down Cruz is now into double digits, but Bush down there in 5th place. So, you know, AB, we talk about the fact that he is sort of one of the policy wonks in this race, but right now it doesn't seem like that's what the public wants.
No, the public is, or the Republican primary electorate is swooning for something new and something irreverent, a glass breaker, a mold breaker, because they believe that the current system isn't working and Jeb is associated with the old system. So are other people in the race that have held public office. He is doing terribly in the polling. It doesn't matter what poll you look at. Jeb is always, you know, hoping that he's in the top 5. And that would be a good poll for Jeb. But he's playing a long game, and I think actually it's smart. There's no point in getting out now if there is a chance that Trump leaves the race, probably on a high note, and Ben Carson implodes. And there are people who think, and they might be wrong, that there is a scenario where there will be a reordering of the race, and Jeb will be a player in that. Fiorina might, Rubio, Cruz, Kasich, but that there'd be a new top 4 and top 5 that voters in Iowa and New Hampshire won't be making up their minds until January, or at the earliest mid to late December, and that there's time for this. And so if he quits now just because he has bad polls, you know, and that actually ends up happening, you know, he loses. So he's going to stay in and dog it.
Yeah, and unlike a couple we've seen bow out, the governors Walker and Perry, Jeb's got a lot of money in the bank, and that buys you a lot of longevity as this continues to play out. Meanwhile, he's got this little dust-up going now again with Donald Trump, based on a female who stood up to ask a question at a Trump event. We'll play a little bit of that, and then we'll talk about the fallout.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can prove me wrong, but I don't think that you're a friend to women.
I knew I shouldn't have picked her. I knew I shouldn't have picked her. All right, so let me give you that answer right now. I respect women incredibly.
That was Trump speaking at the No Labels event. All right, so he went on to say, tweeted from his account, the arrogant young woman who questioned me in such a nasty fashion at No Labels yesterday was a Jeb staffer, all caps. How can he beat Russia and China? Question mark. Then we have some return fire, some tweets from Tim Miller of the Bush campaign saying she's a volunteer supporter. This is a college kid we're talking about. Didn't agree with her question, but boy, is Trump sensitive when challenged by women. And we got another iteration of that, the same thing. You know, does it work for them, Charles?
I mean, nasty and arrogant. She starts by saying, maybe I'm wrong. She continues by saying, maybe you can prove me wrong. That's a kind of polite way to do it. It was a direct question. I don't think it was completely out of line. Look, I think Trump is showing that this is what he usually does, is he reacts very strongly. And it raises the question, when the other guys and gals in the race begin to run negative advertising. And there's a lot in his past, both ideological and otherwise, that can be highlighted. How will he react? And that's going to be the real test of the Trump campaign. I don't think he implodes because of anything he says on his own, but I think this will be the test, and it will be a test of temperament, and that's what you need in choosing a president.
All right, let's take a look at some of the Democrat-related polls as well ahead of the debate tonight. Hillary Clinton still with a very strong lead, 45% to Bernie Sanders, 25%, and Biden's 19%. Biden's not even technically in. What's really interesting, though, is when you look at the matchups, you put Clinton head-to-head with the top GOP contenders. It shows her, if the election were today, losing to Carson, Trump, Bush, and Fiorina. But when you look at Biden against the top GOP contenders, he's winning against most of them. Trump, Bush, Fiorina, Carson, and 1 point ahead of Rubio. George, what are you going to look for tonight other than a surprise appearance by Joe Biden?
Well, Mrs. Clinton has nothing to gain from brawling with these people. She's ahead, and the polls actually indicate a kind of stability at this point. I think the fact that $18 trillion is the figure now attached to Bernie Sanders' program might have got some people's attention. And Joe Biden, maybe people are saying, look, it looks better in the shop window than it would at home, this particular knickknack we're thinking of buying. People should remember he ran in Iowa hard in 2008 and got 0.9% of the vote. So he doesn't have a strong record on this. He got three guys on the stage, O'Malley, Chafee, and Webb, who have nothing to lose. So they could, well...
They could be spoilers.
They could. Jim Webb is a interesting, accomplished man with a very different take on the world and on the Democratic Party's relationship to working people. It'd be interesting to hear how he
Yeah, and with
comes.
his military background as well, some of those foreign policy issues could be very interesting. All right, stick around. Don't go anywhere, panel. Next up, speaking of this, is Syria becoming a proxy war between Russia and the U.S.? We'll debate that next.